Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to a special discussion topic about new concert trends that I think suck. And we'll see what you have to think about all of this as well. But, for shows that are announced before the artists are locked in or not disclosing all of the concert details in advance of tickets going on sale. Of course, we've had discussions about the use of backing tracks or support vocalists coming in, artists that are now performing sitting down or at worst even in wheelchairs, and bands that are going out on the road with no original members. All of these sort of things I think are trends that really suck, and I want to get into this and break it down and talk all about it. So join me for that in just a bit. But before we get started, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also leave a comment, hit like. All those things do help support my channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by turning on notifications, you'll never miss an episode and stay up to date on really cool discussion topics like this with new concert trends that suck. And I'm sure you guys know a bunch of other ones beyond the ones that I just mentioned that are probably worth a discussion on here as well. But we're going to kick off with where promoters announce the shows before all the details are locked in, before all the bands are locked in, and before any of that stuff is set. They announce the shows, and then after these shows sell out, that's when more and more info is coming out. And I always feel bad for some of the people that have bought tickets that maybe won't be happy once that information has changed. And one of the biggest culprits to this is the sort of hottest ticket around right now, and it is the Back to the Beginning, billed as the Black Sabbath final show. This is the Ozzy Osbourne farewell. He's going to do a solo set. He's also going to play with the original lineup of Black Sabbath one more time, and it takes place July 5th in Birmingham. But as more and more of the information came out on that, because when it was first billed, it was Black Sabbath's final show. They didn't talk about bands doing tributes to them and that Ozzy might not perform every song with Black Sabbath and whatnot. So ultimately, it starts to unfold that Ozzy's only going to perform a handful of songs, 5 or 6 songs with Black Sabbath, and Black Sabbath is not even going to be performing a full set. And then it starts coming out about guest performers, that there's going to be Metallica, Guns N' Roses, Tool, Slayer, Pantera. They're going to be performing Black Sabbath songs, so they're not even doing their own set, opening the shows. No real clarity as to what is going on. Are these bands going to be doing 2 or 3 songs? Are they going to be doing any of their own material? Or are they just going to do one song and we're going to hear 10 of these bands come out and do one song, and then Black Sabbath come out and do 5 songs to close, and that's the extent? We still don't really know at this point. But when it was finally announced that Ozzy would only be performing 5 or 6 songs, I know that really upset a lot of people. It upset me because I thought that it was going to be a final Black Sabbath show, that even if these other artists were going to come in and perform and do things, that you were going to get at least 10 or 12 Black Sabbath songs, an hour-long performance of Black Sabbath at the end of the night doing a thing. And it doesn't really seem to be that at all. And then recently, Sharon Osbourne, who's really the one, the puppet master pulling all the strings behind the scenes and doing this, announced that one of the major bands that was listed as being part of this have actually been pulled from the performance due to some kind of altercation between her and the band's manager. And there's been a lot of speculation that it's the band Tool, although I think that might have been disproven already. She has not said who it is. Maybe they will fix it in the interim, but if a band is kicked off of the bill after having been promoted because she has an altercation with the band's manager, again, it just seems like it shouldn't be going on that way. These shows should not be announced until everything is set and locked in and the fan can be told what it is that is going on and taking place so they know what they're spending their money on, because the tickets for these things are astronomically priced. And another one that is doing the same sort of thing is the Kiss Army Storms Vegas event, done to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Kiss Army. It's taking place November 14th, 15th, and 16th. And when originally announced, it was Kiss that was performing a show. It was their first show back after a 2-year hiatus since they had done their reunion shows back in their farewell shows back in December of 2023. And very quickly, it was changed to it only being Gene and Paul performing, and they were not doing it as Kiss. And then they were only doing a few songs. So it really unfolded very fast from being a Kiss reunion show to being only Gene and Paul to being only a few songs. But then it's completely flipped now. And this is probably has to do with backlash, or maybe that the tickets haven't been selling. But Paul Stanley has now announced that the show itself is going through some major changes, which just the announcement of that really upsets me, because again, whatever we thought it might have been, it's not. But in this particular case, it does look like it is to the benefit of the fan, because Paul has said that it's going to be a full electric performance by Gene and Paul, and they're going to do 15 songs. So whereas it was just a couple songs and people thought it was going to be acoustic, it's now electric. Paul has also confirmed that Tommy Thayer is also going to take part, as well as Bruce Kulick. No confirmation yet if Eric Singer is going to be there to play drums, but if he does, that will be a full Kiss reunion taking place, in my opinion at least, and having Tommy Thayer and Bruce Kulick there, if they both perform, that will be really cool. And it would also be really cool if they could get Peter Criss and Ace Frehley to attend, since they did not take part in the farewell shows that took place in December of 2023. So yes, sometimes it does go towards the positive when changes are made, but either way, why not lock all of that stuff down when you make the announcements? Another one being Prague Power USA 2025. This show takes place September 5th and 6th. And the bands that have been announced for this were the Night Flight Orchestra, Symphony X, Majestica, Vaden Plas, Jalusic, The Ocean, and more. And then they announced after that that the cancellation of Swedish retro rockers Night Flight Orchestra were no longer taking part due to unforeseen visa issues. And this is following another cancellation from the band The Ocean. No reason was given for that one, but this is the second known cancellation off of the bill since it was first announced. And again, just frustrating as somebody who, if bought tickets to these sort of things, might be very disappointed, because I know how big a fan I am of Night Flight Orchestra. I would have been buying a ticket to see them. And oftentimes when these bands cancel, you can't go and get a refund on your ticket, as these things change and are in flux leading up to the show, the way that you can when, say, a band doesn't perform at a show, you could then get your ticket refunded if you didn't go. So another thing that is really frustrating, and a concert trend that has been pissing me off to no end, is the use of backing tracks. But even more worse than that, in my opinion, is the support vocalist. So there's a lot of bands that do use the backing tracks, and I understand the singers are getting older, and I think I would actually rather the backing use of tracks, as long as it's not fully replacing anyone singing, nobody is lip syncing. I don't mind backing tracks. So Motley Crue has been a band that has been rumored to do that, although they say they don't. But we all know how Vince Neil sings. He has never been a great singer. He's definitely not a good singer these days, so probably are using backing tracks. But what I don't like is when they bring out other singers to flesh out the front man. So Whitesnake took Dino Jalusic out on the road on their farewell tour to flesh out the vocals of David Coverdale. And I don't really want an extra singer standing up there assisting the guy that we are there to see, especially in a band like Whitesnake, where everything centers around him. He is the one and only remaining original member. He's the one everybody is there to see. And if he can't perform up to snuff, then he probably shouldn't be out on the road. And that is just my opinion. Mr. Big doing their farewell tour brought Michel Lupe from Whitesnake. He does keyboards and background vocals for Whitesnake. They brought him out to flesh out the vocals for Eric Martin, Mr. Big frontman. And I didn't find that out until well into their farewell tour, but was really surprised to hear that that was even needed, because Eric Martin had always been a very powerful singer, but, age obviously has caught up with him. And the most recent to do this is David Lee Roth, who retired about 5 years ago because he could no longer do it. And I thought that was very admirable of him, where he canceled his farewell tour, the remaining dates that he had, because he just simply couldn't do it any longer. And now, 5 years on, he comes back and he does a festival appearance, but he had a whole host of backup singers up there, to the point you don't really know what was David Lee Roth versus what was a backup singer up there singing, because there were just so many different vocalists performing. But a lot of people applauded it as well, because at least he brought backup singers and he wasn't still trying to do the vocals that obviously he could no longer do. Another thing out there is where we have artists sitting down now during their performances. And, maybe for some people that's not a big deal, but for me, if I'm used to seeing a show put on and a band with band members moving around the stage and not just standing still, that to me is a real sort of upsetting thing to see an artist at their lowest point, in my opinion. I would rather remember the artist for who they were and what they used to do than to sort of see a shell of the former artist. And so that goes along with the backing vocals. I would rather an artist hang it up when they can't do it anymore. And so we know that in the Ozzy farewell show with Black Sabbath, that he most likely is going to be doing it from a seated position, and that too already being announced that he will probably be seated for the show. And I myself already would have said, not going to do it, not going to go see an Ozzy or a Black Sabbath show where he is seated. Paul Di'Anno did seated shows at the end of his tour. I mean, he died unexpectedly, but I mean, shows that he was doing following a leg amputation, and Leslie West ended up doing the same thing from a seated position due to a leg amputation. And I understand that these are tragedies that the bands go through, and if they can still perform and they're still going to get out there, and people say, well, isn't it the music that matters? And I also see it from that perspective. Most recently, we had Ann Wilson of Heart performing in a wheelchair. But I guess, again, for me, it just is that whole shell of a former artist themselves being up there. And I want to remember these artists for who they were and how great they were, not seeing them in some sort of shell persona. So the last thing to touch on here is bands that go out on the road with no original members. You've got bands like Yes, which still has Steve Howe, arguably one of their most famous members, playing lead guitar. The rest of the guys in there are all later day era people. We do have Jeff Downs from the 1980 Drama album, but newer singers, newer bass players and stuff in there. So no original members in Yes, and yet they're still out on the road. I can kind of get behind it with Yes, because we still have Steve Howe, and we have a number of other members in the group that come from later day era lineups. But you have bands like Foreigner, who have no original members. We still have Mick Jones on guitar, who is running things from behind the scenes. But he isn't there. He's hired a replacement to play the lead guitar for himself. And even longtime vocalist Kelly Hansen is stepping down after 20 years after the current tour that they're on. They've got another guy coming in to take on lead vocals. In fact, it's the same guy that Mick Jones hired to play lead guitar for him, will also be the singer going forward. But they just sound like paid tribute or official tribute artists up there instead. And that's exactly what this next one is. We have Whitesnake going out as Whitesnake Experience because there's no David Coverdale, but David Coverdale has officially sanctioned them going out. So it's the lineup of Whitesnake, the guys that support and back up David Coverdale, going out and playing a festival appearance. They do say this is a one-off thing, but I can see where this could turn into a bigger thing. Jefferson Starship is out on the road with no original members. And recently reunited band Savatage is out with no original members. Granted, though, they do have, again, a number of people from arguably their heyday, because Savatage was a full-on metal band before becoming more of the rock, opera, theatrical style artists that they became in the 90s. So Zach Stevens, the vocalist who took over in 93, is there, along with a number of other guys that have been with the group. Johnny Lee Middleton, their bassist from 1985, is the longest serving member, but not an original member. We do have Chris Caffery up there on guitar, who's been with the band since, I think, 87. So a lot of guys in that lineup worthy of being and playing under the name Savatage, but it's no original members. We have John Oliva, the last original member of the group, who is also the mastermind and still, writes for the band, but he's not out performing with the group, though he is orchestrating things from, beyond. And of course, probably most famous for this, Quiet Riot out on the road, no original members. Kevin Dubrow was the last original member. They recorded 2 albums that only came out in Japan. Those are ones with Randy Rhoads on guitar. So by the time they did their 3rd album, Metal Health, that is their biggest album that everybody knows them for, and what a lot of people think is their first album, we had their drummer, Frankie Bannerly. We had Rudy Sarzo, who didn't play on the whole album, but he was on the album. And so we had those guys out for a while, but Frankie Bannerly has now since passed away. Rudy Sarzo is there. But again, as I said, he didn't play on the entirety of that third album, if you will, Quiet Riot, Metal Health, Come On Feel the Noise. That wasn't Metal Health, the song. That wasn't played by Rudy Sarzo. That was played by, I think, Chuck Wright, the previous bass player, which Rudy came in to replace. So, you have all these different bands out there doing things like that. I think Leonard Skinner is out on the road with no original members. We do have Ricky Medlock, who used to play drums but didn't record on the first album for the band. By the time that came around, Ricky Medlock was out doing Blackfoot, but Ricky Medlock back in the group playing guitar. So do they have an original member? It's questionable. I think it's all about legality at this point. So lots of bands out there out on the road with no original members, basically being tribute artists. And it just seems like that is a running theme, that we are going to have more and more bands out there with no original members. And of these groups and the aging members and things that are within those lineups, when they get too old to be standing up, putting on the full performance routine that they once did, they're going to be seated. They might even be in wheelchairs if they are having health issues. And when we do have shows going on, it seems they are rushed to judgment, and you have to be careful because maybe not all the information has been announced up front, and it could change, and that's sort of the shady side of concert promoting. But all in all, lots of these different things, these new concert trends that I think really, really suck and are getting a bit out of control. And with the price of concert tickets That's where I myself, at least, am drawing the line. And I've stopped going to a lot of shows. I don't go to nearly as many as I once did. Once upon a time, going back 4 or 5 years, I used to go see 10, 12, 15 shows a year. And if you go back to my youth, I used to see as many as 2 to 3 shows a week. But it's all just been going down, mostly due to price of tickets and, of course, free time. But yeah, that's where things stand for me, at least on this. It's some of the newer concert trends that I think that suck. What are some that I didn't mention that you guys are seeing that you're bothered by? And how overall do you think this is affecting the concert market? Are they going to end up burning up any goodwill left with the fans and these high-priced tickets by doing the things that they're doing? We'll have to wait and see, right? But anyway, there you go. New concert trends that suck. That's where things are at. Weigh in, let me know your thoughts. And all in all, though, I hope you still enjoy the shows you're going to see. And I hope you have a good day. All right, everyone, take care. Bye-bye.